Hi everyone, it's Tina at Penumbra Beauty. So thank you for joining me on my Hourglass review / overview of the Ambient Lighting Powders and the blushes. So I'll be sort of doing them in conjunction. So just a quick comparison. So the Ambient Lighting Powders come in this sort of chocolatey brown reflective packaging that are fingerprint hell. They sort of smudge, but I mean easy to wipe down. There's also the limited edition palette. So there are 6 ambient lighting powders. There's an additional 7th powder in the actual palette itself, but I'll get to that sort of later on. But in the blushes, so far there are only the 6 standard size. You've got 10 grams of product in the actual ambient lighting powders versus 4.2 in the blushes. And as you can see, these are the chocolatey ones, which are the ambient lighting powders, and the ambient lighting blushes have that sort of gold packaging. Very elegant, they look great, you know, even just as a gift. I do like the packaging despite the smudges and all that sort of stuff. And the boxes are all the same though. They come in that sort of browny, brassy packaging. I didn't quite get them at first, because honestly, and I know a lot of you may sort of get where I'm coming from, is that we sort of get drawn into the hype of a lot of stuff, you know, in posts, blogs, YouTube, etc. We sort of get drawn into it. There was a lot of excitement about the ambient lighting powders and a little bit of confusion what to sort of use them for, but you can use them in so many different ways. Some people even like to use these under their eyes to set and highlight under there. Depending on how you're using the powder, for example, I'm going to show you the one that I love the most. It's Mood Light, and you can tell the actual Hourglass name is worn off, quite well worn, and even the powder, like it comes raised, but there is the Mood Light. It's like a lavender, pale pink sort of, as you can see, color. And they're all very velvety soft. One thing I must say first off, just be careful if you get them and you go to use them and you only need the lightest touch. You should be able to get quite a long time use out of the powders. I mean, for 10 grams. But I know some people think, they are quite pricey. Now I got most of the ambient lighting powders in Australia, whereas I got most of the blushes internationally. But I'll put the prices US versus Australian down below. But just bear in mind with the blushes, because these are actually, this is the Mood Exposure, whereas that was the Mood ambient lighting powder. These have that sort of marbled effect to them. So not all of them are going to look this, not all of them are going to have the same ratio to blush as to powder. So when you look at it, all of the blushes have the name of the ambient lighting powder first, so Mood, and then the second part of the name would be the actual blush. So Exposure is the blush. That's the best way I can sort of describe it. But as you can see, in there is the actual powder. You've got the Mood powder and the actual blush. So there is the Mood ambient lighting powder versus the Mood Exposure blush. And sometimes it is good, like for example, you might be more of a blush sort of person. You might think, you sort of looked online, which sort of blush to sort of get if you wanted to get them. And that way you can actually try the actual powders. Of course you'd need like a fine sort of brush to get in there and just sort of try it. And then with these, you can obviously swirl it around to sort of get that sort of diffused effect of the powder integrated with the actual blush itself. Now I have Mood Exposure, this one on, the actual blush on, and I don't know how well it's going to come off. And I do have quite a few of them actually on because I use them in different ways. Now, so that's my blush, and they are honestly, you look at it and go, that's quite a nice plum color. It's a plummy rose color, as I would describe it, and it's more up my alley because it's sort of more of a sort of a berry tone rather than your sort of bright sort of pinks to an actual blush. That's more of what I like, and it does honestly show up better than any of the other blushes on my skin. It just does, because it is slightly darker. I also have freckles and all bits and pieces are going on there, so it does show up a lot better than the other ones. Most of the other blushes and powders sort of pale out on my skin. It's just how it is, and it really does depend. Like if you're very pale, this might be a little bit dark for you, or you might love it, whereas some of the other ones which are a little bit lighter, more corally, more pink, might work beautifully to give you a nice flush. deeper tone to a blush, as you can see there, hopefully. And they're not chalky. I've gone and played with all of them. They don't come off chalky to me. They're silky soft, but like I said, you just got to use a light touch to them. But that is the mix of the two, the blush and the powder, and it's beautiful, beautiful color. But it's more for my sort of coloring as well. As to the actual just the bare powder, there it is there, just the powder. As you can see, very light lavendy pink color. You would never put that much on, but I'm just for the sake of the swatch. And it comes off quite pink, and hopefully that does show up, but it is a beautiful color. Now, like I was saying, I do love this either all over, just depends what look I'm going for, and wear it over the top of other blushes. Like I've got a lot of blue tone pinks, and I think this it goes well over the top, just to give a slight glow. That's the best way I can describe it. And obviously it will work better on different sort of tones. For me, this does show up quite well, so that's sort of why I like it. But I don't look purple. But I do find that using, or whether it be this or Max Fix Plus or whatever you like as a setting spray, whether it be more water-based or more alcohol-based, just to sort of set the look and help it sort of last and sort of blend in with my other powders, and it's worked well over cream. The next one that I used almost equally with as Mood Light, and even in conjunction with Mood Light, is Dim Light. Now this one, you can also tell how much I've used it. It's got all these little pot marks in it but they do come off nicely. It's like a raised powder when you originally get it, but you can see all the pot marks. I've attacked this to no end, but like I said, be gentle. But this one is more of your beigey color in comparison to the Mood Light, so you can sort of really see what I'm talking about, hopefully. You see, this is more your pinky, this is more your beige. So you might think, oh, I'm more that colouring, that'll be my thing. Go for it. I have used this as a setting powder all over because it has the same sort of finish as this. Like some are more, I hate to say the word shimmery, but they do have more of a slight sparkle to it. But I'll show you when I get to it. But this is just it's more like I don't know if you call them semi-mattes, demi-mattes. It's not 100% matte sort of finish to your skin. But I will swatch this one. As you can see, it is quite beige. It's quite sort of pale if you do attack it like that, but it doesn't make you look pale if you use the lightest touch. But there it is there. Hopefully you can see that it's a little bit more beigey tone, more close to, I suppose, a natural skin sort of colouring than the Mood Light, which is the lavender. And this I've even used sort of all over the lid. That's what I sort of like them. I've used them all over. Now, I'm not very sensitive to a lot of products, but I do wear contacts, but I have worn them around sort of all over the lid as well. I prefer more of either matte to demi-matte sort of finishes to powders and blushes and eyeshadows and that. So that's just sort of what I've done. I've worn it all over the lid to sort of even out my skin tone. I have worn it all over the face as a setting powder. So showing you the actual blush. This is like a coral. It's a beautiful pinky coral with the powder, and there's obviously the powder. But in comparison to, say, Mood, you can see they're quite looking purely at the blush, So this is Infusion, so it's dim powder with the Infusion blush, and this is the Mood. So more of your plummy pink lovers, maybe like myself. If you like your coral colours, maybe you might be drawn towards this one. Or you're very light tone and you want sort of this. Or like you're a little bit deeper in colouring than I am and you like the sort of corals as well. But it's not a bright coral. But there it is there. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference. That is much more of your, you know, more impact than this ever will on my skin. So there it is there. So it's something I have worn, but it's more, I've got other coral powders or more of my warm pinks. I sort of wear it over the sort of top of that just to give it a nice sort of finish to it. I've even worn it all, it sounds a bit odd, how could you wear it all over? But I have on days when I'm kicking back at home, I've got a BB cream on or a CC cream or something, and I just want a little bit of flush, so I'm just sort of pop it on in there, or I can even use it as a highlighter as well, because it's just so light, but it's quite brightening as well, but it's your warm brightening. Now the next one is Radiant Light. It's one of my next favorite. And this one I love to sort of complement a tan. I've used it on other people, this one, and I have sort of around my sort of décolletage as well. Sort of, this is a little bit paler than my arms and my face, and then I'll just get it a nice little bit of a sheen to the skin. And the best way I can say it is like a dry sheen. Like it's not, it just warms up the skin as that. I've used it all over the face, on the cheeks, over my bronzer. You can see there, it's much warmer than the other powders. There's dim and there is radiant. It's beautiful, just warms up the face, and you can really sort of tell the difference. This is dim light, and this, as you can see, this is much warmer. It's more of your sort of beigey, whereas I said this is kind of a beigey. This is much like a warmer beige. This one's quite pale in comparison. Now this one I think is actually, to each their own, but I think this one gives the most beautiful blush out of them, just looking at it. Prepare yourselves. This is Radiant Magenta. So it's got the Radiant powder in here, this is the blush, and Magenta. That is the Magenta, sorry, Radiant Magenta blush, and that, and obviously as compared to Mood. And you can see Mood almost looks more like browner in comparison to that. Like that's a beautiful blush color, like a beautiful pinky, purpley toned, but more of a brighter pink. Whereas this one is more of your plummy colors, like your burgundy, more of your red, brown pinks, if that makes sense. Your rosy sort of colors. Whereas that's more of your happy pinks. But it is beautiful. The next one is Diffused Light. Now I've barely used this, but I do know a lot of people that are more, I suppose, yellow based skin tones that have actually gotten sort of this one and use them as an everyday, what do you call it, as a setting powder all over the face, and you know, just sort of brighten it up, give a nice glow. And this is the one that I have actually used also all over my lid. What I've done is, whether sometimes my shadows just seem a little bit too dark for me, and I've sort of patted this slightly over like the whole look in my eye. I've also done it as, you know, sort of just got a fine tipped eye brush, so I've used it as a sort of to highlight my brow bone. I don't really need to highlight too much because I've got, you know, my poor sparse eyebrows, over plucked eyebrows, and all this sort of space going on. I don't need to highlight too much, otherwise it's drawing the attention in the wrong place. But also the inner corner of the eye. I've even used this one and Ethereal Light as well, which I'll get to. Like I'll put the powder on the brush and then I'll spray it. Like I was using my Release spray, now I'm using Max Fix Plus because I just have it now because of the kit. Sprayed on there, and then I've sort of patted it in the inner corner of my eye and in here to highlight. I've also done some of the powders, actually all of them except for Mood Light, I've done them under here. You know, sort of the opposite of putting like your dark sort of shadow under here, because I sometimes have dark right under here, not here. I'm talking around here. I just want to brighten it up as well. I haven't had any issues. Like I said before, I wear contacts. I don't know about different eye sensitivities as well, because they don't particularly say, oh, great for around the eye area, but that for me, that's sort of what I've done with them as well, as far as wearing them all over, but also like more for highlighting for this one, just because of my skin tone. And you can even, I suppose, use it under the eye to brighten, but I'm very pale. And it does, when you look at it in comparison to the other powders, it is quite white. It's like a white yellow color for my skin tone. But yeah, as you can see, you can use it as a good highlighter because it's got that yellowy tinge to it. You can sort of use it as around there and there. Again, depending on your face shape where you want to highlight, you could use it as your highlighting setting powder, stuff like that, or as your overall face setting powder. And the actual blush, I know this is going to be so long, I apologise, but I didn't want to do all blushes and then do a video on all of the powders, because I feel like they should be done in conjunction, because I mean they've been done separately before. There's lots of posts out there if you want to see it, but it sometimes helps to see the sort of powders. So that is the Diffused Heat. So it's got the diffused powders you can see, and then Heat is the blush. And this one's a little bit more rosy than the Magenta one. So there's the Radiant Magenta. And because I put my finger on it, I really, the brush wouldn't have been so harsh. I really smudged it. Like I just don't like using my finger to swatch things anymore, but I've smudged it. But you can see the Radiant Magenta is more of your purpley, sorry, your blue tone, sort of pink. This one's more of a reddy tone. It's, I'd say sort of brighter, warmer, cooler. And this one, I say it has a slight, more of a sparkle to it. It's the best way I can describe it, but I'll show you in a moment. So there's the actual moment, and the smudge. There is the Diffused Heat. Just wanted to show you the difference. Like I smudged it. So you're putting your finger on it. Sorry, putting your finger on it, it sort of smudged the color around. Whereas if I use a brush, you can hopefully saw how light the powder is. It's sort of cleaned it up. So if you want to keep those clean lines, just stick your fingers in it, and you'll get that, you know, that funny thing over the top that you get sometimes with your powders. Like if you don't clean your brush regularly, or you're getting like your liquids mixed over your powders and in the brush and all that sort of stuff. You know, you get that, I don't know how to describe it. You get that hard, funny film over some of your powders. And obviously sometimes it reacts with your skin, so you touch your skin, double dip it and touch it, and it sort of reacts. But yeah, I like to try and keep the lines clean because it's so pretty. It sounds weird, but that's what I like to do. But there is Diffused Heat and there is Radiant Magenta. Now they're actually quite similar. This, I would say, is a little bit more rosy, a little bit deeper than the Radiant Magenta. But I'd say the Radiant Magenta is a little bit brighter, stronger, more pigmented, only because of the powder that you're sort of mixing it with. More of that natural sparkle to it than Mood or Dim Light. You'd almost say that they're matte in comparison. But that doesn't carry over to the actual blush, which is quite odd. I haven't seen any sort of a shimmer to it or anything when I've mixed it, when I've used the fingers, brush, when I tried to swatch with my fingers, or when I've used the brush. I can't see that at all translating into the powder itself or the actual blush. Luminous, and hence the name I think as well, has a slight sparkle to it, and you only see it very lightly, and it's really hard to catch on camera, but it's just very slight, but it's definitely there, and that carries over to the actual blush. And as you can see, my one, I seem to have more of the powder than the blush itself. Now the last one is Ethereal. And you can see why. It's that sort of almost white. I wouldn't say ghostly white, like, but it is that very slightly pearly, you know, sitting about, you know, under the candles, something, I don't know, under the moonlight. And I'm gonna clean finger for this one. I'm talking, but you can see that is white. It is white. And I'll show you in comparison, to Diffuse, which is the yellowy one, which is, I say, the other lighter version, which I suppose is the other light one in the two. So that is Ethereal, more of your white cast, and that is Diffuse, which is more the yellow. Not sure if that will show up. Skin. So there is Ethereal, there is Diffused. It's much harder to see when you sort of have it so strongly, you know, swatched there. Obviously, when you have your nice light touch with the powder to the skin, it's fine. And Ethereal was the one that I have on at the moment. Might have worn off, but I had it sort of wet on the brush, and I did that to Diffused as well. Sort of, I can wear it in the inner corner as a highlight under the brow bone, very lightly for myself, and then in the inner corner, and I'll just, like I said, I'll pat it on the brush and then spray it with Max Fix Plus or whatever you want, or water, and just have it there. Or I can tap it over other colors if I just want to lighten them, brighten them, eyeshadows that I put on, because sometimes it's just like, whoa. That's what I do, rather than have it as an all over setting. And now the blush, Ethereal Glow is here. It's very pale, as you can see, very pale pink. There is the Ethereal Glow powder, and there is the actual blush. Now this one was just like a surprise to me when I opened the box, and I've got a lot of blush in there. It's something like, this is Luminous Flush. You can see I have more powder, or sort of like half and half, whereas this one you can see there's a lot of that pink. Like I said, it does depend on what you get because of the marble sort of finish to it. But this is very light. This is more I would use as a highlight. But you can see how pale that is mixed together. That'll show up. It kind of reminded me of the finish that Mood Ambient Lighting Powder gives to the skin. So that's it there. It's very, very pale, but I would really only use it as a highlight as opposed to an all-over blush, or I would use it to sort of tone down. Sometimes I just go overboard with some of my blushes. It's just how it is. And particularly something very well pigmented and long-lasting like the Balm In-Stain blushes. I would probably put this over the top to sort of diffuse it a little bit. So I go a little bit wacky with that, but it's just how I am sometimes. It's like, whoa, I should have tapped the brush. But there is the Mood Light, and there is Ethereal Glow. Now, it might be just my eyes, but I swear they kind of look like, if you mix this, it's kind of this finish. So if you do like the Mood Light and you wanted the Mood Light, but you just can't afford that, you could probably try this. And then you could sort of tap around and try and just get more of the blush. It just depends on the amount that you get or the ratio that you end up with. It's not going to be 100% the same, but also bear in mind, even though this is cheaper, obviously you're getting much less product. This is 10 grams, this is 4.2. On the brush, even when I mean that's way too much powder than you would need. You tap it off a bit, but even sort of putting it on the brush, I can see that Mood Light is obviously more of your lavender cast, lavender cast, and the Ethereal Glow is a little bit more pinky, but it's still quite comparable. So that's the Ethereal Glow, that's Mood Light. And the thing with this one, the Ethereal, it's a similar finish to the powder. Like, it doesn't have that slight sparkle to it that Luminous or Radiant does. Luminous, I think, to my eyes, gives the most sparkle, but like I said, it's hard to say diffused because I know there's a powder called Diffused out of this, but it's quite set out or spaced out in the powder. It's sort of not like, oh my gosh, that's a sparkle all through it, that's a glitter, that's a shimmer. It's not like that. But yeah, I've used them as setting powders, glow powders. They don't give a proper glow. You know, they're not glow like as you would put like a luminous sort of cream on or a highlight or something like that. It doesn't quite give you that consistent sparkle or shimmer to it. Lighting effect, but it's very, very light. So if you're very gentle with the powder. But hopefully you can see the whole smorgasbord of powders and blushes on my hand. Like I said, that is much more pigmented than you would probably have on your skin, especially for the ambient lighting powders. Unless you want that, of course, a strappy look. I don't know what you want. I have tried it, I must admit. I've had lip brushes and I've tried to sort of do it over the top of my glosses, particularly with Radiant and Luminous, because of that slight sparkle to it. Didn't quite sort of work out like that. Don't know if they're generally safe for the lips, but I did try it just to sort of see. But no, I think I much prefer it either over the eyeshadows, over the lids, or as an all over lid color, as a face setting powder, as a blush, as a sort of a tan enhancer, as a glow, as a like Luminous and Radiant ambient lighting powders, more of your over your bronzers, sort of stuff like that. I have sort of used them. Honestly, with Luminous and Radiant, you could possibly get away with it, or more, I'd say Radiant, as a bronzer. You know, ones where if you have those very light sort of bronzers, because this doesn't have a slight sparkle to it, very, very slight, you could use it as your sort of bronzer rather than a contour powder. But you could use it over that if you wanted to, that's what you wanted to achieve. Have it as a bronzer. But I'd more say as a bronzer complementer. but over the lid really nice too if you want to. And quickly on this one, obviously don't forget the palette, this one has the dim light, so I'm going to do it upside down. This one has the dim light and the radiant light, so I've already gone over those two, and you can sort of see the comparison. So dim light versus radiant light, that's a little bit cooler, that's a bit warmer. And this one is incandescent light, I suppose like a candlelight sort of glow, but it's very beautiful. And it's, I mean, I kind of had in mind, oh, it'd be kind of like ethereal, very very white pale, but it's not. It's much more, let's see, it's not at all like that. So that's ethereal, and hopefully it shows up. This is obviously your white cast. Incandescent light is a much more sort of muted beige, as you can see. If that's your warm radiant, that's your dim, which is a bit cooler, all of your, I suppose, cool tone beige. That's your incandescent. So it sits right, it's really more to this end. So that's it there. You can see it's quite light, but you'd never use that much